Welcome to the deep dive.
And today we're tackling a really interesting one from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
That's right, rule number 3. Make friends with people who want the best for you.
Yeah, our mission today is sort of unpack that. What does it really mean? Why is it so important?
And crucially, how can we actually, use it in our own
Well, it
lives?
sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Almost common sense.
Right. But when you start digging, it touches on some really fundamental stuff about connection.
And how the people we choose, uh, how they subtly shape who we become, it's quite deep, actually.
Definitely. Peterson talks about this idea from Freud, repetition compulsion.
Right, the unconscious drive to repeat past patterns, even painful ones.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, why do people sometimes keep choosing friends who aren't good for them, who pull them down?
Well, maybe it comes from low self-worth, a feeling deep down that you don't deserve better.
Where maybe it's just easier. The known bad feels safer than the unknown good.
That can definitely be part of it. The inertia of the familiar, even if it's harmful. There can be a weird comfort in shared misery, like a twisted sense of belonging.
And then there's the flip side, the urge to rescue people like that, especially when you're young.
Ah, yes, the rescuer complex.
You see someone struggling, maybe going down a bad path, and you feel this pull like, I can help them, I can fix this.
Noble intentions, perhaps?
Maybe. But Peterson argues that often it's actually driven by vanity, or even a subtle kind of narcissism.
Also,
He uses this really powerful example from Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Remember that?
vaguely, yeah, the underground man and Liza.
Exactly. This guy, the underground man, is deeply flawed, bitter, arrogant. He meets Liza, who's basically on the verge of prostitution, and he gets these grand ideas about saving her.
Right, these messianic fantasies.
Yeah, he gives her this big speech, makes her feel like there's hope, but then later his own insecurity and cruelty take over, and he just completely humiliates her.
Crushing the very hope he created. Devastating.
Totally. And Peterson's point is, a villain who despairs, who wallows in misery, isn't a hero. And our attempts to rescue others can sometimes be more about puffing up our own egos than actually helping.
That Dostoevsky example is so sharp because it really exposes that hidden self-interest, doesn't it? The focus slides from real help to boosting your own image, feeling superior maybe.
Yeah, and people might say, but wait, didn't historical figures like Christ associate with outcasts and sinners?
That's a common counter-argument.
But Peterson's response is, well, figures like Christ are often presented as archetypes, as perfect ideals. We're not that. We're fallible humans.
Right, operating on a different level.
And he raises this really critical point. Sometimes when you try to pull someone up, you risk getting dragged down yourself. Or maybe you pull them down further somehow.
He uses that analogy, right, of putting a really problematic worker onto a high-performing team.
Exactly. What usually happens, does the one person magically improve?
Rarely. More often, the whole team's performance starts to suffer. They
Yeah.
get dragged down.
Yeah. He says the psychological literature backs this up. And his line is stark. Down is a lot easier than up.
It really highlights that we need to think about the bigger picture, the systemic effects of trying to help. Good intentions aren't enough if the outcome is negative for everyone involved.
So it forces you to really look hard at your own motives when you feel that urge to save someone. Is it really about them? Or is it maybe, subconsciously, about wanting people to see how compassionate you are? Or proving your own strength?
Or even just feeling virtuous by comparison. Look how good I am for dealing with this difficult person.
Yeah. That kind of self-reflection is so important, isn't it? Being honest about why you're doing what you're doing, not just acting on impulse.
Absolutely crucial. Understanding our own underlying intentions and the likely results, rather than just going with the feeling.
Peterson also challenges us to think about whether staying in unhealthy relationships might actually be the easiest thing to do.
Easier than what?
Easier than confronting the problem or making a difficult change. He calls it the path of least resistance, not necessarily the most helpful path.
Can you give an example?
Like maybe you endlessly listen to a friend complain about their terrible marriage, but they never actually do anything to change it. You feel supportive listening.
But are you maybe just enabling the status quo, allowing them to vent without ever taking action?
Exactly. Or tolerating a friend's binge drinking weekend after weekend. You think you're being loyal, maybe?
But you're not challenging the destructive pattern. You're kind of normalizing it by sticking around.
Right. And he asks this really sharp question. Does the person you're trying to save even want to be saved?
Oof. Yeah.
Or have they maybe, on some level, accepted their suffering because taking responsibility, actually changing, feels harder?
That cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Personal agency. Real change needs that internal desire, that willingness to face the hard stuff and take ownership.
And then he talks about this idea of an implicit contract in some
An
friendships.
unspoken agreement
Yeah, especially in groups that are kind of negative or stuck. It's like there's this silent understanding we're all in this cynical, going nowhere boat together.
aimed at failure almost, or at least accepting it.
Yeah, maybe aimed at nihilism, failure, suffering, sacrificing the future for the sort of grim comfort of the present. And nobody ever actually says it out loud.
But that unspoken pact, that group dynamic, can be incredibly powerful, really insidious, makes it super hard for anyone to break ranks and try to aim higher.
So before rushing in to help, Peterson says we have to try and understand why someone is struggling.
Get to the root causes.
Yeah. And he warns against the default assumption that they're just a noble, innocent victim of circumstance.
Why is that a bad assumption?
Because, he argues, it's often the least likely explanation. And more importantly, seeing them only as a victim denies their own agency, their own choices in the situation.
That's a challenging perspective. But it does force you to consider their active role, not just blame everything externally.
He suggests maybe our default assumption should be the opposite,
Hmm.
that perhaps they've rejected the harder upward path, consciously or not, because it's difficult.
It shifts the focus to internal choices, resistance to growth.
He brings in Carl Rogers here, the therapist.
Oh, yeah. What did Roger say?
Rogers believed that a genuine desire to improve, to change, is absolutely essential for any kind of therapeutic progress. You just can't force someone to get better if they don't truly want it deep down.
The futility of forced help.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So Peterson then turns it back on us. If you find yourself stuck in one of these draining, unhealthy relationships, is it really loyalty? Or is it maybe your own weakness?
Weakness.
Like maybe you don't have the strength or the courage to leave, to set boundaries. So you mask that weakness with this performance of being loyal or compassionate.
Like a kind of pointless martyrdom, as he calls it.
Yeah.
Suffering through it just to appear good.
Exactly. And he suggests maybe the stronger, more genuinely helpful thing is to focus on your own life, your own growth. Get your own act together.
And lead by example.
Yeah. Maybe that's more powerful in the long run.
That can definitely be a more potent catalyst for change sometimes, showing an alternative path without judging or pushing.
Now, obviously, he's clear this isn't about just ditching people who are genuinely in crisis and need support.
Right, it's not justification for abandoning people in real need. There's nuance here.
But he asks this incredibly direct question, and it's worth thinking about.
Hmm.
If you wouldn't recommend a particular friend to your sister or your brother or your parent, someone you really care about, then why are they your friend?
Oof. That's a
Yeah.
tough one to sit with. Really makes you evaluate.
Right. And he says, look, loyalty isn't stupidity. Real loyalty has to be negotiated and has to be honest, based on mutual respect.
It needs boundaries. Healthy relationships need boundaries.
And friendship, fundamentally, is a reciprocal arrangement, or it should be. You don't have some moral duty to keep supporting someone who is actively making the world worse or dragging you down.
True friendship should ideally lift both people up, shouldn't it? Or at least be aiming in a positive direction together, not just be a drain.
He actually says it's not just okay, but praiseworthy to choose friends who are good for you.
People whose own lives would genuinely improve if they saw your life improving.
Yes. Those are the friends with the upward aim. They'll support you when you try to do better.
They won't tolerate your cynicism or your destructive impulses for long.
Right. They'll offer encouragement, but also maybe a bit of careful punishment, like calling you out when you're being stupid or self-destructive, constructive criticism.
Yeah, holding you accountable in a supportive way.
Contrast that with people who aren't aiming up. What do they do when you try to improve?
Well, they might offer temptations, right? Try to pull you back into old bad habits. Oh, come on, just one drink.
Or they get jealous when you succeed. They withdraw support.
Undermine your achievements, maybe subtly, maybe not so subtly.
Peterson suggests maybe sometimes that's a test. Can you withstand it? But often it's just about their own insecurity, their own resistance to change.
Yeah, your growth highlights their stagnation.
Hmm.
and that can be uncomfortable for them.
He even talks about how positive examples like great art or real-life heroes can challenge people, like Michelangelo's David.
How so?
Just by existing, by showing what's possible, it can confront other people's cynicism and their inertia. It reveals their own potential, maybe, that they aren't living up to.
So the mere presence of excellence, of someone striving upwards, can be both inspiring and deeply challenging for those who've kind of settled. Makes them reevaluate.
Exactly. So Peterson wraps this up by saying, look, doing this, surrounding yourself with good, healthy people who want the best for you, it's not easy.
No, it definitely takes effort and courage.
Yeah, it requires strength, daring, good judgment. He advises us to have humility, but also courage.
And use that judgment to protect yourself from uncritical compassion, from pity that isn't actually helpful.
Right. Discernment is key, and he brings it right back to that core rule, simple but profound.
Make friends with people who want the best for you.
Yeah. So the big takeaway here, I think, is just how incredibly powerful our friendships are. Their impact on our lives, our direction is just huge.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
And the importance of being really conscious, really intentional about choosing companions who genuinely support our growth, our well-being.
Absolutely. It's not passive. It's an active choice.
And it requires ongoing evaluation, doesn't it? Things change, people change.
For sure. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Think about one significant relationship in your life right now.
This one.
Does this person truly, genuinely want the best for you? Not just say they do, but want it.
And how does that show up? What are the subtle signs, or maybe the subtle signs that it's absent?
Yeah. And maybe reflect on those unspoken, implicit contracts, too. What are the unsaid agreements shaping the dynamics in your friendships?
Lots to think about there. It's a really vital piece of advice.